So a lot of people have been saying that Navi's major run was a fluke, and you can tell because they haven't done almost anything since then. And depending on the way you define fluke, you could say that it was definitely a miracle run, but I think when it comes down to it, Navi have some of the best preparation of any team, especially, obviously, because of Blade. And when it comes down to that, you're looking at how good Navi do in events where they have a good amount of time to prepare, and they know, especially if they know their opponents. So you're looking at how Navi do at the biggest events. I think those are the events where you can really analyze, are they, was it kind of a miracle run? Or is it that they're, they just aren't putting the same amount of time into the smaller events and they're managing their expectations, they're managing their burnout? Because even Faze have talked about this with Kerrigan, that there are certain events that they take a lot more seriously, and there are certain events where they, they kind of show up, and you wouldn't say that they play it as practice, I don't think, but they play it more as like, we're not going to be doing a boot camp leading into that. We're not, you kind of build up to a crescendo where as the season goes on, you're looking at certain events where you do a lot of practicing up and up and up until this event. And then at that event, you do your best. And then afterwards, you might back off a bit from practicing. You might not be kind of accelerating the meta. Maybe you even, at times, you might not show like a really important, piece of utility you might want to throw, that type of thing. So when it comes to Blast, this isn't necessarily an event that you would think matters. I mean, it's not like Cologne or Katowice, and it's not a major. However, it is an event where they had plenty of time to prepare, and you would expect that this is an event where they certainly could be showcasing something quite good. And you're also looking at a phase where they are a little weaker, right? They're not looking that great recently. Now, anyways, we've got this window smoke. You can actually throw window smokes that don't... So the edge of smokes, right, are a lot easier to spam through. And there are window smokes I've seen that don't, like, on that sawhorse, right, the standard old school window smoke will allow you to spam through it like Rops did there. I get lots of kills on that. But there are, I believe, window smokes that prevent that. And then here you've got Rain in Palace. I'm surprised he didn't push all the way into Palace off of that kill, because he did kill the bomb. Obviously, he wants to continue fighting, but I'm actually really surprised that he didn't just go into Palace off that. Obviously, though, it's weird for the bomb to be alone in Palace, so he might be thinking to himself that there's maybe a second player there, but just the way Wonderful ran through Palace, it did kind of generally look like he was alone. So it still is generally a bit surprising that he didn't just back up. But there are problems with backing up as well, right? Because if you back up into Palace and you just move back here, you are just waiting for this player to come through here, which is cool. But at that point, this guy, they just clear out here, they clear out here, and then they come fight you alone, and then you're alone. It can actually turn into a bit of an awkward situation. If he knew a player came out ramp, I'm guessing he probably wouldn't have been fighting quite like that, because that player ramp's just going to kill him every time. But anyways, there is a bit of a change, by the way, in the way you have to molly a ramp now. You have to throw it a little bit differently. And if you want to, so you either throw it the way Rain's going to be throwing it here, where you need to throw it specifically so it gets that ledge. Otherwise, people can jump up and kind of catch you crossing. Or if you throw it deep, you can throw it deep. But the problem is if you throw it deeper, you have to throw it from closer, which means your position is given up a little bit, or you have to take the risk of falling back. Anyways, Rain with that jump up, it's funny that it's such a small change, because this little drop from on the bricks to down on, ramp level, doesn't seem like that big of a change, but it actually is a massive change in the way you can play a ramp, because now if you ever want to be checking Palace, you either have to strafe all the way out to check like this, which just isn't even that good of an engagement, but it also takes a lot of time to do so, or you have to jump up, which is cool, but then you have to drop and make noise. And so it's funny just how small of a change that feels like it is, but how much of an impact I think it has on actually how rounds play out in general. But yeah, Navi's just going to get rolled over there. So, I mean, that's really what you're expecting. They had the one deagle, and the key to that round is JL, unfortunately for him, did not get a kill with that deagle, but the deagle was also locked down. So not only did he not get a kill, Bit, who really, it seemed like the plan was for Bit to get that deagle if JL died, he couldn't get it. So it really just destroyed the round. But because you're on MP9s here and you're not on like the full buy, you have this push up from Faze where Kerrigan throws the deeps. This is a really good kind of combination, by the way. You throw a deep molly and then you smoke on the molly and you can play close up and get a lot of control. Now the problem with that, you know, it does kind of, it does become problematic at times because you end up with no smoke, no molly unless you want to fight through the smoke, which can be risky. But you can also combo that with sometimes having, you know, having a player support you. And like you can actually have players spam through the wood, and people, when that smoke gets thrown, are typically in a very specific spot if they're there. But here, Wonderful already with 4 kills. And Wonderful, if you look at his stats, actually, since the Major, I think he's been really struggling. And I think he is more of a... the problem is, I'm not sure if Wonderful is more of a passive opper, not to say supportive opper, because I think that's just like a bullshit term, to be honest, but he's not like a Monacy that likes to kind of necessarily be hyper aggressive peeking into him. That's what it feels like, but I'm not sure if maybe that's just the way he's being utilized, and perhaps that's not actually the way he, you know, his strength, right? It's possible that's not even his strength. But anyways, going for the pop-out B, I'd like to look at the actual statistics of this because it does feel like FaZe has teams go for these sorts of plays more often against them. However, I haven't looked at I haven't looked at the numbers to see exactly how often any team, you know, does this against non-FaZe, right? But it does feel like it would make a lot of sense as well for teams to do this more against FaZe because Kerrigan plays B, and if you're looking for a weak link, it's obviously going to be Kerrigan. But again, Wonderful is just like carrying right now. 2 rounds where he almost single-handedly wins the round for his team. Now, a couple of those were trades in that round, so, you know, his team did play a part. You can never underestimate, you know, if someone gets 3 kills, he can do it on his own, like Nico style, or he can get 3 kills where the major reason that he got those 3 kills was because he was trading off of teammates, right? Okay, so FaZe went for the underpass play. Navi is going for a fairly standard play themselves. They're going for mid control. They're doing a slow mid control where they're trying to get the player underpass to get something done. Now, this is how a lot of teams are playing mid now, but the problem with this is that this is kind of actually an old school way of playing Mirage. 2 players out top mid, 1 underpass. This was like the Virtus Pro way of taking it back in like 2015, and then you would have 1A, 1B, right? Now, Navi are doing it with the 1 player underpass who is going to clear it, but the problem is when you have only 1 player underpass, especially with the way people use smokes now, you can have ROPS supporting, you can have a player in underpass. Usually, traditionally, you always wanted to have a player in, you always wanted the pressure to come from top mid and then the underpass pressure to come afterwards because the underpass pressure would then be able to, would be a lot more safe with mid pressure preventing someone from peeking them from connector. But a lot of teams are playing it this other way now. And you'll notice there was a double lurk on A. That is a later development. That is something that you see teams doing since like 2019-ish. I think teams started doing that a lot because there's only 1 A player. And that means that, you know, he can't be watching both positions at the same time. And you saw exactly how that worked. The first A player lurked, made contact, and he ended up dying, which isn't the point. But he made contact, but he still ended up dying. The A player ended up dying at the end of the round, or at the end of the day, because you can't really control both positions. He gave his location away. Wonderful's got to get that trade. That's just a trade Wonderful has to be getting, I think. I mean, Brokey hit a nice shot there. You can give him credit, but at the same time, he really just has to be hitting that trade. Okay, I thought he almost didn't have time. Okay, so 1v1. Jail's already been injured. The smoke does give him a lot of room to work with, so he can come through, he can jump on default, and with the old smokes, I would say jumping on default is the play, because you could one-way it. But with new smokes, the one-way is much less effective, so jumping on top is just not as good. and moving around, you're kind of just playing cat and mouse there. But with 10 HP, that's exactly the type of situation you're happy to be in. But Kerrigan just had the right idea there, so got to give Kerrigan some credit. But now, even with 600 bomb defuse money, you're still seeing, you know, you're going to end up in these force buy wars eventually if you just keep planting and you keep losing rounds, right? So it's not force buy wars, rather, but it's just, you know, the buy back to back to back to back to back, right? And with this type of buy, you're expecting more lurk, more aggressive lurk type plays because the amount of utility coming from the T's is going to be a lot lower, right? You're expecting this type of buy, but you're expecting the buy to not be very effective. So you're expecting, if you notice what Faze was doing there, they had 3 players over towards A. They were looking directly for that type of double lurk situation, trying to shut it down early, and they were trying to pivot to control mid when they could. And it worked pretty effectively, right? But Bit is still going to make his way out because this type of play is actually very hard to deal with. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind, by the way, is that this type of double lurk play is really effective if you play basically good players. Because I've noticed that one of the weirdest disconnects between lower level play and higher level play is that at very low level play, teams or players are addicted to doubling up A. For whatever reason, A players always tell their teammates they need help A, they need to be doubled up A. I guess because people do just double lurk out. But at high levels, you play solo A. And if you're playing solo A, then that's the type of play you want to be making, right? That double lurk is really effective against solo A. It's a lot less effective against duo A, in which case mid takes are just going to be stupidly effective. Because if they're playing 2A, and they don't have a connector player, and if you don't have any connector control, you actually end up in this like sort of really awkward spot at times where, oh my god, that's a nice shot. You can see exactly how these guys won the major, right? JL is just laser beaming people, so is Imma, you know. Anyways, that second A player typically is going to play like stairs very often, more often than not. They're going to play in the stairs area. And if they're playing there and you lose mid control, or they lose mid control, they end up in this spot that is just really bad because they're just going to end up getting pinched down, and they don't necessarily want to be in that situation, and then they're going to have almost no idea of how to play out from that situation. So at lower levels, I think it's just so easy to just go for heavier mid control and ignore A. But if you're playing like, I don't know, face it like 7 maybe is where I don't have an exact number, but I think like around by face it 7, you should mostly be seeing people actually playing a 1-3-1 the majority of the time, which is what you're looking to deal with if you want to do a double lurk A. Anyways, this is a pretty solid angle to deal with the double lurk A, by the way, because you're fairly safe from everything. Then you have your opper connector, and Rain can support middle from triple, and he can throw utility if he wants without being caught. One of the problems with A players, one of the things that goes wrong is that you want to throw utility to help your mid players, but when you throw it, you end up in this situation where they immediately know exactly where you are after you throw it, right? So this duel is basically going to decide the round. If Rain won that duel, this round would go very differently, but 3v5 now, you're probably looking at a save, but they just have this super delayed lurk from Bit that's just going to shut everything down. And unfortunately for Faze, you know, when you're going for Kerrigan with the op, you're generally kind of looking for him to catch that Bit lurk, trying to actually get something done before they know that you have that double op. So even if Kerrigan survived there, it would have ended up being a pretty awkward situation for him. But the Bit lurk actually, I thought it was going to shut down and make it so that Faze wouldn't save any guns, which would have been massive, right? But even just saving the op, I mean, look at how much money they have, right? They had fairly, okay, just kidding. They had a couple okay rounds at the very beginning. They had fairly like large losses in almost all of these rounds, and that's like I almost said unseen. Like, you could call Wonderful's like kills, the 3K you got the one round, the 4K you got the other round. You could call them not that important, but they obviously are very important, because when it comes down to it, by the end of the half, that impacts how much Faze can buy quite significantly. So Faze's buy here is really, really hurt, compared to what it could be if they just closed out rounds without Wonderful and JL just hitting like really nice shots at the same time. But one of the things you have now is Bit certainly could be going for a more aggressive pattern here because Kerrigan died. And did the op already shoot? No, the op didn't already shoot. So because Kerrigan died, they know there's no double op, and that might suggest that they might want to go for like Bit aggressive, lurking a little more aggressively. But that's not generally something you see too often at the higher levels of play. That's something you see very often in pugs. But again, I think we saw Spirit doing that at least a little bit, where they would just kind of like have a player look for a bit of contact there. And you can draw out utility on Kerrigan as well. Because Kerrigan's jump spotting here. If he spots someone, he's probably going to have to toss that smoke down. But regardless, part of the benefit of playing the way that Navi was playing earlier with the aggressive double lurking is they can make a bit of noise on ramp, and they can make a bit of noise in Palace without it being obvious that they're going A. If they had, you know, they meticulously cleared ramp there, and you would expect a different reaction if they weren't balanced in the way they were playing, I think. They weren't showing presence on rounds that they weren't going there as well. So anyways, this is the type of econ where it's easy to get caught off guard if you're not paying attention, but like at this level, people just know. You're just already aware of this situation that Faze is going to be on a terrible buy, probably saving. So they're just kind of... They're looking for the right moments. And I've seen a lot of players now. This little Alexi B play where he actually ran almost straight up cat and looked for this fight. This is the longest range fight on the map. And I've seen on like anti-ecos and anti-force buys a lot of people going for that recently. It is definitely something that throws off timings, and you catch people at the ranges you want. You just have to have the right utility to support it, which is rare to find unless you're playing with the team. But if you have the right utility, it's pretty effective. Anyways, Faze now going for, they're just going to abandon A, go for the heavy mid play. I mean, Rain is here, technically, but if they walk out ramp, like, this isn't exactly where you want to be if Navi walk out ramp, right? This is like, you can get caught off guard here so easily, right? So, this is really just meant for mid control. And by the way, I think that, I'm not sure exactly where you can hear this from. Because I think they might have heard, I think Bit might have heard this in the previous round, heard him jumping. I'm not sure how close Bit got. He might have heard him jumping and been ready to go for this exact play because they know how Kerrigan's playing that. And they go for a quick play with Imma coming out with one flash. So this is just a genre of plays. I've shown this a few times before, but Imma's going to get close up, go very quickly, flash comes overhead, and he's out. He's trying to catch the players throwing utility before they can reposition. Because if you look at what Kerrigan does here, what Kerrigan wants to do is he wants to toss down this smoke, and he wants to use that to reposition to either the back pillar, or if he's got the right timing, he can try to catch them crossing the window initially, or sometimes you can even jump on this garbage can here, and you can catch an angle. What angle are you catching? I think over here, over the smoke. I can't remember. But that's really what he's looking for. And so you want to get that player out before that reposition, and that's what makes it very awkward, very uncomfortable for a B player. When you don't give them that time to move and find a decent location to defend from, you're jumping on top of them immediately, especially if their second player isn't there. But even with the second player there, one of the things that timing will get is that Imma could have gotten out before the cat player is actually rotated over, because that's another of your main worries, is that cat player rotates over a little too early. So here, seemingly kind of predicting that type of aggression and ramp. I mean, it's definitely what Faze have been doing quite a bit, and with this type of buy, I'd have a feeling this is just a play that Faze like to go for a lot on these sorts of buys. I've seen Faze go for it a decent amount. This kind of walk up close ramp and then try and get some information. A lot of teams do this type of play too, because you don't have a lot of utility. A ramp, I mean, A is a place where you might be tending to want to lean towards when you know your opponents don't have great utility, because it requires a lot of utility to hold to prevent, because you can kind of just walk out here with a couple rifles, like with an AWP, and you can take a lot of good duels, and then you can like molly from Palace, and you can make it very uncomfortable to hold for the CTs if they aren't able to smoke off ramp consistently. So if you take control of A ramp, you can play pretty effectively with pretty bad weaponry in A ramp with like a player here and a player here. I've seen so many times that this type of duo combo, the T's try and walk back late, and they get baited by this guy, and then this guy gets a kill, and then they just, their whole team crumbles, right? That's happened so many times. So if you can get control of A ramp, that is a great play on those sorts of kind of low buys, especially if they're low buys with not great utility, but you still have like MP9s and stuff like that. So obviously Navi were kind of expecting that type of play and very ready for the aggression. And if the aggression doesn't come, as long as the aggression on the B side isn't so fast that oh my god, as long as the aggression isn't so fast that they're already flanking, which Navi's not going to let that timing happen, then it's still a pretty good play. Anyways, Alexi B, by the way, is an incredibly good, oh my god, an incredibly good pistol player. Yeah, Frozen. All right, we're just going to watch that one back. Alexi B, by the way, is like one of the, when I looked before when I made my pistol video, he was like a top 20 pistol player, because Alexi B is actually surprisingly good individually, but when it comes to like calling and playing, there actually are a lot of IGLs that have surprisingly good aim, but either they can't turn it, they're just not like good riflers, because there is obviously a lot more to CS than just aim, right? You have to play a certain way, you have to play smart, and there's a lot more to calling, by the way, than just playing smart. You'll notice like a lot of callers, like Hooksy is an example. I saw a few plays from him today where he made kind of arguably not great plays, like you might even call them arguably boneheaded plays is what I was thinking. But he's like, nobody says he's not a good IGL. The thing is, there's a difference between strategic calling, strategic ideas, and kind of like the very specifics of like getting the right timing on a play, or sometimes even you might know the right play, but you make a really bad one in the moment because you're trying to, because you struggle to find the right decision in the exact moment, which is, you know, essentially why people become coaches and YouTubers and shit. So JL, okay, bottom mid. They're just going for the exactly what we were looking at from Faze and the is it? No. It's just a standard 3 mid hold. I thought Bit was there to support. But Bit's playing triple, pretty standard. You've just got the double fight off the catwalk, which is really the type of thing that you're expecting Faze to be good at. And they generally are pretty good at that, but there's a problem, and this is basically exactly why when you saw Navi, they were sending this player underpass earlier, because you've got JL coming out from underpass, which is quite hard to deal with currently, right? He threw the smoke and Frozen didn't check, so they don't even know that this smoke exists, and so they don't know what they're actually dealing with, right? So you can see exactly why Navi was throwing that same smoke themselves, because off of contact, JL swings out, and he can catch someone off guard that's trying to deal with Cat. Because the main places that are going to be really strong against this Cat play is if you get into here, that's really destroys that Cat area, right? And so JL peeking out off of contact, he's going to kill all of these people here and just shut it down entirely. There's different pros and cons, obviously, to that type of play, right? So Frozen was more worried about maybe a B aggression, and he wanted to go underpass off of contact top mid, and they sent 3 players top mid, not just 2, right? So they had the numbers to kind of overwhelm top mid and then make it safe for a player to move underpass afterwards. But still, you can see exactly why those types of the difference in plays is present, right? Different teams are going to prioritize slightly differently in those scenarios. All right, so you actually still have a buy from Navi, and they're just addicted to fighting in mid. Okay. They're just like hard fighting in mid consistently. And they're just like straight up dueling. They've got some flashes, right? Wonderful's going to jump up. They're going to have some extra flashes, I believe. There's an extra flash from... Yeah, there's a flash that just popped from probably the B player. Because you actually can, by the way, flash from B that blinds a lot of people in middle. And they're just going to be looking for the engagement. I'm not sure if they were expecting what buy they were expecting. They might not have expected Faze to have an op, but I mean, even in the previous round where Faze had a solid buy, they were still looking at the exact same situation. They were just trying to duel in mid. And then you'll notice they just abandoned B. Similar to Dust 2, this is a situation that not enough people in Pugs, I think, do, where, you know, if your opponents are going B, it's going to take them a while to go B. So you can leave B for a little bit and then pivot back afterwards. And a lot of the time, I mean, sometimes you're going to get screwed by it, right? That's the thing about if you have a player that's aggressively lurking B, this rotate back is a lot faster, right? If Frozen had been... like in the previous round, if Frozen had been in upper apartments and he had cleared all of this out, then this rotate back to B could come a lot faster, and that would make a big difference in the timing, and that would mean that they could potentially catch Wonderful off guard before he could actually get off of Cat. But when you have to spend all of that time going back around the way that FaZe did this time, that amount of time, that little bit of extra time that you end up having to waste is the time that you need. Right? It's the time that you need to catch that player where there is nobody B. So, all that to say, pivoting off of B when things are going wrong in the round, if you're in like a 3v4 or a 3v5, is a highly effective play that your teams might yell at you a little bit for, admittedly. They might occasionally be like, dude, what the fuck? But it's like, you don't do that in a 5v5, right? You don't just leave B randomly, right? You do that in something like a 3v4, right? Or a 3v5 even, like especially those types of situations where the round is really getting out of hand. Those are the situations where you're looking to make those plays. Anyways. Dueling out mid, I mean, we saw Navi do something fairly similar, especially with the way Navi's playing in middle, taking those types of duels, and those are generally not bad plays to make when you're fighting against pistols. You're fighting at very long range. You can peek out there, get a lot of information, and if your opponents, I've said this in a couple demo reviews now, if your opponents use enough utility to take mid without leaving big openings where you can just pick one off with an M4 and get away, if your opponents do a correct mid take, the amount of utility that takes is really high, right? And that means that you're not going to have a ton of utility for the late round play. So either they spend the right utility to take mid or they don't, and if they don't, then that duel in mid can be really effective, and if they do, it's pretty easy to pivot off. Okay, so this time they actually have someone in underpass. They have two players in underpass. It's really hard not to get spammed here. Oh, I really like that play. I really like that play. So you almost never see a double underpass. This is like really rare. If you have two people here, it's going to be one holding B apps and one underpass, right? So when you start getting spammed, which is really common because this is a hard angle not to get spammed at it. There's very few places you can play. Imez like, okay, just get me out. Let's move out. And you're worried about that mid play. You're worried about rain coming through the mid smoke. But instead, the spam starts happening from Frozen and Kerrigan comes through the smoke just a few seconds afterwards, knowing that with the spam from so far away, Imez he's just gonna try and get away. I really like that play. That's nice. Okay. So Navi, again, they're just so heavy on the mid control. Like, things are going wrong, and I think they were likely looking to pivot back into mid control off of contact there as well. And they're even going to jump out window. They're so, like, they're just playing, this is like so, I feel like this is so Faze-esque. In like, you play off of the contact, you lose a player in mid, and you're still comfortable like looking for the re-aggression, and then off of that contact, you're getting even more aggressive from every other position on the map. So off of the contact of the Opera, you have a guy jump out window, and then you have the two guys go aggressive on Cat. And again, you can see the calculation going on here. They left A basically completely empty, because are FaZe going to be walking out A? Well, FaZe could walk out A, but you kind of have to you're taking a lot of risk by walking out A. There could be someone just posted up on you and you could just die. So you're kind of leaning into the potential for, you know, are your opponents going to be taking those sorts of risks all the time, or are they going to be playing a little more safe? Are they going to be playing a little more, you know, coordinated, you might say. Anyways, Kerrigan with the scout. Okay, I just assumed this was like Brokey or Robs or something. It's Kerrigan with the scout. This is an awkward angle to peek, by the way. I feel like you have a massive disadvantage if your opponents walk up like that. So it's such an awkward angle to peek, even though you kind of, I mean, in that situation, you're feeling like you need to peek it, but it's such an awkward situation to peek on. Because you just have such a disadvantage there. You can still swing in and win, especially against pistols, but you have to find the timing where they're a little further back. And if there's multiple players, because they see your feet before you see them, you're kind of screwed. But again, I mean, Navi are just like, this is such an interesting game because Navi are tripling down on let's just fight in mid, and FaZe are tripling down on we're gonna run a default. Like, we're gonna run a default until we're gonna keep doing this until it works, right? And we're gonna make it work, right? Which is, that's definitely Kerrigan's style of calling, I feel like, generally. Is Mirage, especially as a map, if your default's not working, it's very hard to do anything. If your default's just getting destroyed, you're probably just losing. So you kind of just need to continually, to some extent, very often, oh my god, that is not a fucking easy shot, dude. To some extent, you just need to run the default over and over until it starts working. That's like, you can have different styles of play. Maybe you run a slightly different style of default, but a lot of teams, they mostly like one style of default, especially because you get comfortable with it. If you run too many styles of defaults, even though in theory, Brokey might not have even seen them. With the way mollies work, the way mollies light up in this game, I feel like he might not have even seen that. But you can have multiple styles of default, but then the effectiveness of each default kind of goes down if you have multiple styles because you're just less comfortable with it, is one of the problems. So there are other options to how to play around, but if you really want like a more consistent, like if you want to consistently be able to win, it's like winning Inferno without having banana control, right? Like, can you do it? Like, can you lose the banana control battle and still win rounds on Inferno? Yes. But more likely, it's going to happen like FaZe versus Navi in the major final, where you lose banana control, and because you lose banana control, you just don't have any good plays. Like, just the whole game goes to shit around that, you know? That's the most likely situation. And that's how, you know, that's how it's going to work with mid on Mirage. Most likely situation, if you can't get any control of mid on Mirage, is you're probably going to lose. Anyways, now they're going for the faking, like, kind of going for mid control, but more so putting pressure on mid so they can go for the double lurk. But this is why you're seeing a lot of teams have really moved towards this smoke and palace rather than over smoking ramp. Teams like are leaving ramp a lot more often now and smoking palace, which back in the day I think used to happen a lot more often, but then teams just moved to smoking ramp over and over and leaving palace, because in theory it's a lot harder to walk out palace than it is to walk out ramp. Ramp just generally feels better. However, palace can ramp is a little harder to resmoke. I think is probably one part of it. You can resmoke palace kind of continually from a lot of different locations. And palace also goes from safety to aggression a lot faster. So I'm just gonna pause for a second here. Palace, you're like fully safe up until here. Then you can peek out and you have full vision of all of site and all of jungle, right? Whereas ramp, it's more of a slow progression. As you move further and further out, you get further and further information, and you're more and more in the open, which means a flash over and a peek from a triple player or a peek from CT is going to destroy you a lot more effectively. And an opper can deal with ramp a lot more effectively as well. So you're kind of deterred from walking out ramp dry because there could just be an opper sitting here posted on you. And if there is, you're just going to fucking die, right? So there's a lot of deterrences away from going out ramp dry like that. And because of those deterrences, it does seem to make a lot of sense to be mollying palace instead of mollying, smoking palace in the mid round rather than ramp. Although ramp, you know, can go very wrong for exactly those types of situations that FaZe was just in. FaZe just delayed. They put some pressure on mid, and then they double walked out ramp. And it's very hard for an A player to be able to deal with that type of situation. But Navi found a way to do it. They had a quick rotate, they had good utility, and they just landed a couple nice shots as well. But then Robs couldn't peek out because once the contact was made on ramp, it's like, okay, well, contact's made on ramp, we're just going to immediately pivot and be ready for palace. And as soon as they were ready, you know, Robs knows that he can't peek out. He knows that can't work. And usually if you're double lurking, as you'll remember from Navi, on Navi's T side, let's just watch this back again. On Navi's T side, usually if you're double lurking, the palace player is going to make contact second for all the reasons I already mentioned. So that's nice from Alexi B. He's got this really great angle, and that angle kind of sucks to some extent if your opponents can get close on you because they're going to be looking that side. When they come out, right, they come out looking this way, which means you kind of are right in front of them. Then if you want to drop out, you got to be looking up here, but they can jump out here. But with support from a teammate and a molly, it makes that play insanely effective. So really, and good timing on the smoke too, because Alexi B threw that like delayed smoke that also cut off any ability for them to trade when he peeked out into it. So that was just like picturesque. You know, that's exactly what you want if you're Navi in this type of situation. Anyways. By the way, if you're ever trying to plant in a smoke, the general best practice is to plant on the opposite side of where you would normally plant. So normally you plant, let's just wait for the smoke to go. I've seen so many people die planting them. Like if you're like 10 seconds left, you have to plant. You know someone could be here. You're like, fuck it, we got to plant. You drop a smoke, and then people drop a smoke and they plant default. Nah, I'm shaking my head right. Nah. Drop a smoke, plant opposite default. This is also just like a pretty solid angle because you can actually see it kind of through this spot here. Look, you can get spammed there even a little bit more easily, but the odds of getting spammed there are a lot lower, whereas everyone has a pretty good vibe. They have a vibe of where generally default is. That's where they're going to be spamming the most of the time. Okay, so Faze's solution so far in this game has been to go heavier through underpass, which does make perfect sense, and it works perfectly this time. This is the type of setup. So Navi, this is a relatively risky setup for exactly this reason, right? Bit's going to be trying to get up close, which is one of the things that Navi's T-side default was a little bit weak to, was this type of play, but they were playing so safe and so passive against it, they were very ready for this play, right? So Bit can try and make his way around, and this is the angle that you're worried most about when it comes to underpass. But Rain's timing here, with a couple of flashes to support, they got the Mullion connector, there's going to be a flash over as well, smoke in window, there's the flash pop, and he's going for exactly that play, and then that player top mid, even if he had gotten a kill on a Brokey, would have been in a horrifically bad spot to be able to deal with anything. But the problem is, because of the way they're playing, because they're going for this mid control with double underpass, they have nobody in apartments, and that means this pivot from B, from Alexi B, has been so much stronger, right? So they've been weaker on the sides because they're spending so much on middle. Now, in this case, Alexi B is still going to abandon B, or he's going to think about it, but he actually goes back thinking that Faze might have been reading that and been able to deal with it, because I'm not sure if they knew exactly how many people were there. Hold on. They knew there were 2 top mid, and I think they knew there were 2 underpass, so there's only 1 lurker, and so they're thinking about where that lurker is. Alexi B is worried it's B, and Navi are going to pivot into this aggressive play on ramp, or on A, which is either you can pivot back and the way Navi have been doing the majority of this game, you can pivot back and go for that like retake into mid, or like not a retake into mid, but you kind of just like cut it off and you make sure that they can't run up cat and they can't come up connector, and you're like ready to recontest in mid off of contact, often from like this player here or this player, like you might have a player here or whatever. You're looking for that timing, and off of that contact you might swing out here, you might swing out from ladder, you might swing out from cat, and then if it's long enough, eventually they have to have done something, and then you can walk back into mid. You saw Wonderful do that a couple rounds ago. The other option is to pivot back into an A aggression, and I think if your opper is in the right spot, and you have enough information for how many people were mid. So they knew that 3 of these 4 players were mid. So someone is lurking somewhere, most likely, and if they're not, then they're just making a massive mistake. Like, you have to have a lurker somewhere, right? So someone's lurking somewhere, and then so pivoting back to walk into ramp is really effective because it gives you a ton of information, plus you can set up your rifler on here if you want and look this way, and you can have your opper walk back and he can end up in an okay spot. Or you can just stay doubled on A and play retake if you want, like especially earlier on in the rounds. Not retake, but you can basically play to save if they go A. Now, there is a bit of danger. You notice I didn't say walk push through, because walk pushing through is great, but sometimes it becomes a little clear that that type of thing is happening, depending on how the round's playing out. And this type of peek back from Rain is how rounds can go really, really badly. And this is just kind of the realities of CS that people, I don't know, I feel like people, it's nice. it's nice to think about CS as like this 300 IQ chess game. And to some extent, it kind of is, right? There is lots of mind games going on. There's lots of cool things that happen in CS that are important and that matter a lot more than just mechanics, or matter as much or more than mechanics. However, to some extent, a lot of situations you put yourself in, you're just going to have to take some aim duels. And you're going to have to take some risks where you go, you know, if I just lose this aim duel, then we're going to be in a pretty bad spot in the round. And Navi is very willing to do that, and so is Faze. And that can end up in some kind of weird situations where, yeah, the push through T-spawn is risky. I wouldn't make it myself, probably, because I wouldn't be able... I lose that gunfight, right? But it's a risk that's, like, totally fine to take. You just have to have, like, decent reads on the timings of how soon are the T's going to be worried about that, and can you beat that timing? Because if Rain just turns around and gets that kill, and Rain probably has an advantage there. The problem is Rain, that's one of those situations for Rain where it feels like he's kind of like, I don't want to say he's desperate, but that is a situation where, they're 3v3. Should he be going for that play? I'm not sure. What do you guys think? You guys tell me. Because I feel like he could have just not... He chased JL there because he has a bit of an advantage, and JL has to get back around that corner towards A ramp, right? So it makes sense to chase him, but I also feel like as soon as Rain starts moving forward, I think he's got a disadvantage there against JL. So it depends how much he thinks he hit him for. If he thinks he lit JL pretty badly, then chasing him to finish him off makes a lot of sense. Because if he doesn't do that, if JL gets away, the problem is it's not the greatest engagement from Rain, but the bigger problem actually is that if JL gets away, there's not that much time. I think they only have like 50 seconds. If JL gets away, are they going back A? Probably fucking not. Like, the amount of angles that Rain would have to clear, because he would have to re-clear Palace too, because he could go ramp, but JL could have just run away from ramp and gone right back into Palace, right? He would have had to re-clear Palace. I think he's kind of forced to go for that. But if he gets that kill, the round is like so chill. Like, they're just going to win it like so consistently. But if he doesn't get that kill, if he dies, they're going to lose it like every time. I think that's just the reality of CS. I don't know. No, I do know. That is the reality of CS. You're sometimes just going to be in those spots where it's like you have to take a risk, and it's not the best situation ever, but if you get the kill, it's too good if you get the kill to not go for it, and it's too bad if you don't get the kill to not go for it. It's just like everything kind of forces you into going for it. If they were 4v3, I think I wouldn't have liked that play from Rain, because if they're 4v3, then they can take that contact where Rain sees JL, and they can speed up on the connector side and try and come through jungle connector. Unlikely that JL has a second player with him with how aggressive he was, which means that player might be in window, and there might be a player cat, and so they can move 3-up connector, probably smoke off jungle, and then just like kill JL and they win the round. But 3v3, that's, especially if they didn't have a smoke, I'm not sure, that's probably necessary. So I don't know why I asked the question, because I feel like I know the answer. I don't know. You guys might disagree. Who the fuck knows? You guys can have your opinions. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you want a demo review of your own, where I actually know what I'm talking about, and I'm not trying to learn things, go to the Patreon. And someone in my comments one time was like, nobody cares about your Patreon. And I muted him from my channel. There's a button that says hide user from channel. So anything he comments for the rest of his fucking life on my channel, if he ever comes back, never gonna get seen again. Okay, that was hurtful, dude. Okay, yeah, I know nobody cares about the Patreon, probably. Okay, but you know what, man? I'm providing you guys with value, and you might want your own review. The problem is I'm not being professional enough in these. If I'm like, I know exactly the answer to all of these questions, and I'm not like, because this is a learning experience, I don't sound like I know that much what I'm talking about. I feel like I generally mostly know what I'm talking about. So I don't know. I'm a fucking idiot, dude. That's all I'm saying.